Tuesday, December 18th, the last Waterworks Board Trustees meeting for the year of 2012, 3:30 p.m. I'll call the meeting to order. The first item would be the consent agenda. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. We'll go to item 2 would be public comment period. At this time, any public employee, anyone is welcome to address the board for 5 minutes on any subject. Do we have anyone wishing to do that? If we have no public comment, we'll go to action items number 3.
Dave?
Yes.
I want to suggest that I understand there's a proposal to make an addition to the tentative agenda.
Thank you.
It's in front of you. You may want to address that.
In the public right now.
The real issue would be, I think Rick is hinting appropriately that we would like to amend your agenda to add item 3 special under the action items.
After item H.
After item H.
Okay.
I think you want to
You need a
approve
motion to that effect?
Okay.
you want to approve the amended agenda.
Do we have a motion?
I move the agenda as amended.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. We'll go to our action items then. Number 3, action item A, a joint resolution of cooperation between West Des Moines Waterworks and Des Moines Waterworks regarding utility savings.
Thank you, David. If I can just briefly touch on this, a number of you, I think all of you, have been involved to some degree in discussions on this item. This is an item that essentially approves a draft resolution now in final form for joint cooperation between the West Des Moines and Des Moines Waterworks concerning collaborative efforts. As you know, I've approved a $40,000 payment to Vienstra and Kim as the engineering consultant firm in West Des Moines that will lead this study. What is not clear in your materials, and I apologize for that, Vienstra and Kim has chosen Camp Dresser McKee Smith out of Kansas City at our insistence of having a national resource that's done these kind of studies to provide assistance to him and to the end result. But the net result is Des Moines Waterworks will pay $40,000 for this study. The study results should be available mid-February, February 11th. As I recall, in West Des Moines, in a to-be agreed-upon formula, will be contributing some portion to the $40,000 payment for this.
Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Discussion.
Just to be clear, we may not equally share that payment, but we may pay more.
I think actually the assumption, Graham, is that we will certainly pay more than half for it based on the size of the utilities. The fighting issue is what metric to measure the respective size of the utilities.
I don't want to get into that.
And I appreciate that. We'll be paying more than $20,000, but we are the ones who are the contracting entity here that will first pay the $40,000 and then negotiate with West Des Moines their fair share.
As is appropriate.
I'm really glad to see we're looking into this.
Any other comments? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Item B, authorization to sell agribusiness parkland.
And if I may, I've had the opportunity to speak with the distinguished departing Deputy City Manager, Mr. Alan McKinley, in the audience. There has been some discussion at the Finance and Audit Committee about this. I've raised some questions on your behalf with the City of Des Moines. Those questions have not been addressed yet because of a number of issues involving City of Des Moines resources, including a council meeting last night. I would ask that you defer action on this and allow me an opportunity to further investigate really the source of your questions and concerns with the City of Des Moines, and we'll have this on your agenda for consideration in January.
I move that we table item 3B.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Item passes. Item C, election of chairperson and vice chairperson for 2013-14. And Jim, do you want to give your report?
I think there's been quite a bit of discussion so that we pretty much know what people would like to do and not have to do, so to speak. And so when the time is appropriate, and I know that Sue was working on this as well with me, and so when the time is appropriate, I'd like to make a recommendation that Graham Gillette be elected as the chair, and that the outgoing chair, Dave Carlson, would be elected as the vice chair. And those are separate motions, need to be separate votes. And if there's any discussion in between, that should take place. But when we're at that point, I would like to make those recommendations.
Okay. Do we have any other discussion? Do you want to proceed then?
If there's no discussion, the first motion would be that I would recommend that Graham Gillette be elected as the chair of the Des Moines Water Works for 2013 and 2014.
And I second that.
I want to second. Okay, Sue seconds, I guess. Okay. Any other nominees? I guess we'll have an election then. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
Okay, and the second part of that is that I believe that it would be of best interest to our Board of Trustees to have Dave continue in some role in leadership, and that's the reason I would be recommending him for the vice chair to work with Graham. I know that the parks plan, the parkitecture that has been started is dear to Dave's heart, and I also know that there's some other things like the gravel pits and a few other things that we've been looked at that are generated ideas that would like to follow up, and so I guess I'd like to make that recommendation that Dave be the vice chair for the next 2 years or whatever time it would work out, that Dave would at some point acquiesce and not feel that his leadership is needed and someone else could step in and learn from that position, or the 2 years, whichever would happen. And I would like to make that recommendation.
Yeah, I'd like to comment on that. When Leslie feels she has some time, I'd really like her to, in a year or whatever you think. Anyway, you're asking for a second.
I'm asking for a second first.
I'll second.
Okay?
But just to be clear, you're nominating Dave for a 2-year term.
That's all we can do.
That's all I can do is
Just wanted to be- I was
nominate
just a
Dave
little
for a
confused.
2-year term, and
Yeah.
if during that 2 years, Dave,
That's true for me too, I hope.
well, that's, that would be true for you
Thank you.
too.
And if I may, to be clear, under your rules, there's a succession that's codified that essentially says, Graham, if you as chair step aside, there's an automatic ascension of the vice chair into that role. And
I don't plan to do that, but yeah,
I appreciate that. If the vice chair, David, were to step aside, that then you will have the opportunity, you, the board, will have an opportunity to choose vice chair.
Right. And that's right, let's not get ahead of ourselves.
Right.
We're electing a person for 2 years, and
Right.
we'll see what happens.
We're- And that's the recommendation that I wanted to explain my intent.
Do we have a second then?
We had a second.
Okay.
Any other discussion, or?
Any other nominations or anything? Okay, all in favor?
Well,
Aye.
discussion.
Oh, yeah.
Jim and I have not had an opportunity to talk to all the board members. And that was something that we had said we would do. Dave, I haven't had a chance to talk to you yet. So as we were set about being the nominating group, I know you've been out of the country, but we really haven't had a chance to do what we said we were going to do. I just want to make sure that that's clear, so.
And that is true.
Any other
I find that
discussion?
a little disappointing in the fact that we had set aside a nominating committee to provide a slate. For some reason, we weren't able to do that. And I will say that going forward, I will try to make sure that at least my job as chair and my job as a board member is to help with that communication. Hearing as I come in the door some concerns evidently being voiced about the selection process of our CEO and other things that I've never heard of. Dave and I talked about it at once. I find that disturbing to me. I would hope that as a board, we have the ability to communicate with each other, both as a body like this and in public and in private. And so, I'll do my part and work to do my part to improve that communication. If for some reason others feel that that's not working well, I would hope that they would say something, as opposed to letting months go by and then raising some concern in a whispered session off outside of this room. You shouldn't look too surprised, Leslie. Every time the issue has come up about the CEO selection, I'm told about how you were kept uninformed. And
You have not heard that from me.
No, but I've heard it from Dave, and I've heard it, and Jim has told Sue that's how you felt. And if that's not true, then you and I both have a problem, because evidently they've been given that impression, and I certainly that disappoints me greatly, because I think you and I did a good job of keeping that process open. And if we didn't, I want to make sure that I learn from it and we do a better job going forward. So.
Point well taken.
What's that?
I say a point well taken.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I think we resolved any questions there were at the time.
And that's great. And as I say, if there was any breakdown in communication that came that prevented the nominating committee from doing its job as an outgrowth of that, which is the impression I got, I hope we can correct those things.
And if I may, as the center of the CEO search process, at least at some level, my job in part now, I believe, is to keep the five of you communicating regularly, if not directly, then indirectly through me, and I certainly accept that challenge and appreciate that selection processes, no matter who comes out of it. I happen to be the beneficiary of coming out of this one, but they can be contentious and difficult, and I think in any forum I've ever been involved in, there's strains that come out of that process. My job in part, again, is to heal those strains that were part of the selection process, and I accept that challenge and look forward to working with each of the five of you and all of the five of you collectively. So please give me the opportunity to do that and proceed forward with your selection process, and let's move on to business.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Bill.
And I think we can. And as I say, my pledge as both a board member and as chair is to do everything I can to do it. We're a small board. We all have a big job to do, and we should be able to communicate real well. And by all means, if I'm not doing that, slap me on the head and say we need to change things, because I'm the last guy to think that I have all the answers.
Okay, I guess we have the election. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? I guess our slate for the next year is Graham and Carlson and everybody. So we go to item
3D?
D.
An interesting item. Let me step back for a moment, particularly for the benefit of the folks who are listening and viewing this. In 2008, as the board is certainly aware, there were a number of different threats to our facilities made by both the Des Moines and Raccoon Rivers as the 2008 floods came through central Iowa. As part of that process, we, in close coordination with a FEMA representative, developed specific projects to address the threats to the integrity of our system left by the floods. Particularly, a couple projects were done under the assumption and belief, based on conversations with FEMA, that there was money obligated for their reimbursement. As you know, FEMA then de-obligated that money There were a number of projects that had not been addressed yet, but we had intended to with FEMA assistance. This is one of those projects that staff has assessed since the deobligation dispute, believes even though we're very disappointed at FEMA's deobligation of money for this and other projects, that this project is so mission critical to us that it is not a sense of who will pay for it in the long run, it's a sense of the risk of not addressing it. So this project, about $1.6 million in our estimation, we are asking for the ability to go through the public bidding process for completion. Relatedly, I would mention to you that Rick, on our behalf and with my complete agreement and approval, has filed action in the U.S. District Court for the Southern District of Iowa, effective yesterday, naming the Federal Emergency Management Agency as a defendant in an action for reimbursement of that money that was spent on projects before deobligation. So really a two-part issue here. One of them is our need to move forward with an additional project for the protection of our wells on the Des Moines River near the Saylorville treatment facility, but also to inform you and the public that action has been filed in federal district court against the Federal Emergency Management Agency, in our view, for their decision, arbitrary decision to deobligate money from these projects. So what I'm looking for here is your approval to authorize staff to solicit bids for the Sweet Pea raw water system repair at well 1.
Do I hear a motion?
And,
So moved.
and I'm sorry,
Second.
to establish the date of hearing
Okay.
for the January
Sorry.
13th board meeting.
How do I hear one?
So moved.
Second.
Okay.
And in your direction, we will also publish notices required by law.
Any discussion?
How much, where it says that the riverbank has only 56 feet left, how much did it start with? How much is washed away?
I'm going to have to rely on Gary Benjamin for the answer to that. Gary, why don't you come on up here so we get it on record. 56 feet, the question was, if you couldn't hear it, if 56 feet are left, how many are lost?
Well, we lost between 2007, where we sit today, upwards of 25 feet of riverbank, and we've got 56 left.
Okay.
And so that was the urgency of completing this project.
And to help you to visualize this, if you'll, you or anybody in the audience have crossed the Fleur Bridge and looked to the southwest as you're going south at least, or looking to the southwest as you're going north, but slightly different orientation, you'll see the riverbank has been armored is the term that we would use, but you'll see riprap along the left descending bank of the Raccoon, just right past us here. This will be a similar project to that that'll be done on the on the Des Moines River in the Sweet Pea area.
It kind of affects our budget, doesn't it?
It does, and clearly we're fortunate because we had a presentation last month from Peggy on the benefit of revenues that were unbudgeted in 2012 because of higher than expected water use in the drought. This will certainly take a significant bite from that. I believe, however, it's a prudent use of your money and certainly recommend moving forward with the solicitation of bids.
Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The motion passes. Item E, 2013 water service line repairs.
This is a project that has been, let's go back as I turn my pages incorrectly. This project is to accept two bids, competing bids, one bid not being open because bid bond was not available as part of the public bidding process, but then accepting the low responsible bidder, the low and only responsible bidder, Torgerson Excavation. This is for the service line work that typically comes up on a regular basis, where the service line, which is the responsibility of the customer, is to be repaired, and the customer may not either have the resource nor know how to work through that process. We'll step in, make that repair, and then build it back. Sue, I can anticipate you're concerned about a single bidder in this situation. This is consistent with the bid amount that we saw both in our estimate and that we saw in this calendar year or this fiscal year, which is the same as the calendar year at Waterworks. So we believe this is competitively priced, and also believe it's a essential piece of our service, particularly as we get into this time of year where a service line break creates public safety issues with icing on roads and a need to immediately deal with it. We would now, under this contract, have the ability to deal with that with the same provider we currently have, Torgerson Excavator.
So moved.
Second?
In discussion.
So how many of these happen in a year?
300 or so, I believe, is the number, Ted. Is that a swag?
It'll be interesting to see after we do the insurance line, or the insurance for the water lines, if that changes.
It certainly will, in my view, be a number very close to that. The question is who will be paying for it, the insurance company,
Well,
for
yeah.
those who are insured, or
Yeah.
the customer itself. So I would expect we'll see a similar number in 2013, and we'll find out how many subscribers we have in the service line protection process.
You know, this isn't in this, but I have had a couple calls on this insurance line. What about rental houses? Is there a program where the owner of a rental house could pay the $5 a month?
I'm confident Mr. Corrigan, who's standing up and really interested in talking on that, or Amy, either one, who, the question is how a rentor would work in this process, please. And I assume the account holder, it depends on how the account is held, I assume.
It does. It depends on the size of the service line and the configuration of the home. If it's a single-family dwelling, whether
That's
it's
what I'm-
owned outright or a rental property, it will be eligible in either one of those cases.
Are the property owners for rental houses being alerted that the tenant may not wish to have it if he's not really responsible for the repair?
Well, I don't know that we're going to give them that kind of detail. We're going to make all property owners aware that the coverage is available, and then the property owner can decide whether they want to purchase it for the property or not.
But they can do a separate account, or
They can do a separate account, even if they are,
the tenant pays the water and
the tenant pays the water and the property owner pays for this coverage, even if they don't have an account with us. If they're an absentee owner.
I hadn't thought of, I just had a couple calls, people asking that.
Yeah.
And Ted, you mentioned we are going to inform them. Is we Des Moines Waterworks, or is it the service line insured?
Both actually is the plan. We will be doing things through our blog and through our website and through bill stuffers, and then I'm not sure how absentee owners will be notified, but the plan is to jointly with HomeServe make everyone aware.
I can see Amy's thinking, I bet they'll get told.
She's the PR.
Anything you wanted to add, Amy? Or-
Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion, or item passes. Item F, acceptance of the 2012 pre-sedimentation basin number 2 rechaining.
And just because I don't think I've been through one of these projects with you before, not unusual in a situation where we have a project, this is a relatively small one, $70,000, but in our plant facility to have complications that come up. This one adding not quite 20%, but $11,000 or so in change orders. We're asking your approval for this project, which has been completed, with change orders taking it from $69,000 to $80,000, but in our view, very necessary for a successful project completion.
Okay, do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Discussion?
Did our people also work on this? Is that how this worked?
I think our folks would have been, and I'll ask Mike to comment if I characterize this incorrectly, but I believe our folks would have been available or involved in the initial lockout, the process, if you will, of preparation. The contractor comes in and completes the project, and then we're responsible on the back end for re-engagement. That's correct. Is that fair, Michael? But I think the underlying question probably is, why didn't our people do the work, as an example?
Have they ever done all of the work, or is it a situation where you always,
I'm certainly not in a position to be able to tell you whether they've ever done it. There are types of work based on either the complexity or the work conditions. I'm going to bet the work conditions here are not particularly positive, where it makes more sense for our employees and certainly for us to contract it out. This is a warranty-related issue, and easy in and out. But that's why the decision to contract is made in this kind of circumstance. Mike, anything you want to add to that?
Well, I just add, I guess, that the basin season of cleaning and maintaining occurs at the same time when this type of capital improvement needs to happen. Our staff has replaced certain chain segments here, but to do an entire basin, I don't know that we've done an entire basin before. But the key thing to be aware of is that these events are occurring at the same time of the year, and there are some there are manpower issues here to accomplish both at the same time.
To be clear, we've had discussions with Brian and AFSCME leadership about their desire for us to continue to consider our employees first in these projects and other projects. I appreciate that. We'll continue to give that consideration. We may not always agree on what it makes sense to contract or not. I would be very surprised if there was much disagreement on the need to contract out this particular project. We will have those disagreements on other issues, I'm confident.
Thanks.
Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Item F passes. Item G is a public hearing. We'll open the public hearing on the 2012, however you pronounce it, standpipe
exterior painting.
Which, yes. We need comments from the public.
Regarding the form of contract plans and specifications and estimated cost of $185,000. I'm sorry, $130,000. Excuse me.
Okay, sorry. And do we have any comments from the public concerning this?
If I may cue it up, and again inviting public comment after the brief comment on this. Relatively complicated situation involving Wilczynski with a slight piece here involving the standpipes. These are essentially, as Sue asked me, I think in my first or second meeting, the difference between a water tower and a standpipe. I'm told now the standpipe has a singular dimension. I think Rick tried to bail me out on that one. At the time, a singular dimension throughout the vertical structure as opposed to some special bowing. Wilczynski is down here on Park Avenue, as I recall. This is a relatively complicated bid, but for your purposes and looking at the numbers, very competitive situation, obviously, where we have 10 respondents. Our estimation of this work was about $185,000. With the add alternates that we're recommending here, $130,000 response. So we're very pleased with that. Very happy to get this kind of work done. The add alternates here, besides the basic coating, we have several different things added: a vent cap, railing system, and then we're actually power washing a different entity at the Tenney standpipe. So that will explain the add alternates columns A1, A2, and A3. But you'll note they all add up in a way that's well beneath our bid, or well beneath our estimate. The low responsible bidder, we believe, is Champion Coatings. And we look forward to any public comments on this and ultimately to the board's approval.
Okay, guess we close the public hearing. Do we need to do this on this? The board finds that the project reflects appropriate coordination of existing infrastructure and there are no suitable facilities available for rent or sharing in lieu of the project.
Not in this particular case, since we're not building new infrastructure this month.
Okay, so we don't need to do that one. Okay. Do I have a motion to approve the project's form of contract plans and specifications?
And estimated cost.
Second.
And submitted costs. We have a motion? And second, okay.
Second.
Any discussion?
Again, the staff's recommendation is Champion Coating, which we believe is the low responsible bidder.
Okay, no more discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
Now we need another motion, analysis of bids received, and a motion to award the contract. Follow.
Okay, do I have a motion for the,
Yep. I think
Bids.
you've already had an analysis. of
Okay.
bids.
do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion that we award it to the Champion Coatings Incorporated for the amount of $132,000.
Second?
Second.
Any more discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion passes. Is that it, Rick? Okay. We'll go to item H, request authorization to purchase a mobile crane.
Thank you, David. This item really required a great deal of work on behalf of a number of folks who are out here. Mike McKiernan, who spoke earlier, and Jerry Thornburg, who's our supervisor of vehicle maintenance. We had an interest in replacing a 30-ton mobile crane because of the hours used and the need for this crane. It limits really our ability to rent, as an example, and probably restricts our need to purchase new. A great deal of work went on behalf of Jerry in particular to solicit bids through the internet. Two finalists came to play here: Mid-Country Machinery and Crane Sales and Service, $120,000 and $150,000. The amount that we're asking for here involving Mid-Country Machinery is after trade-in for $102,500. And again, that amount is included in our vehicle replacement budget for 2013. And we believe this is exactly the kind of equipment that benefits us in doing work with our workforce as opposed to contracting.
Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. We have a special item next, I think.
We do have special item 3 involving the replacement of a pretty sophisticated piece of lab equipment, chromatograph at about $89,000. Let me apologize first to you that this comes to your agenda through a special amendment of the consent decree, or the consent agenda. This item is one that I take responsibility for not getting on our agenda earlier on. The long and short of this, we have a budgeted replacement for this instrument. However, because of year-end considerations in terms of trade-in, in terms of deals from providers, this item really crystallized for us in the last week or so. I will take the responsibility to keep that from happening in the same shortness of time that you're seeing before you. I don't want to misrepresent that this is an emergency. It is not, but we believe that the ability to procure this at end of year will provide roughly $38,000 of savings that, had we waited till your January meeting under the same circumstances, would have been lost. So the staff recommendation to you is through Dynex as provider to appropriate $88,070.07 for the purchase of one IC unit.
All right, hear a motion.
So moved.
Second?
Second?
Any discussion?
I think it's an opportunity that you just have to take advantage of. Timing wasn't necessarily yours, but we just cannot afford to pass opportunities like this when they come up. So
I do take responsibility for the fact that it's a sudden item on your agenda. I will work with staff in the future to avoid those items, but I would hate for you to miss the opportunity. I believe we have had a number of different staff folks take a look at this. Peggy and Gary, as an example, who are isolated from the transaction itself, and we've all concluded that this is a good business decision, but the process itself probably could have been handled in a way that would have been more elegantly before you and on your agenda. And again, I take responsibility for that, and will take greater measures in the future to avoid that from popping up as a special item.
Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Item passes. We'll go to our information items. I guess we'll have our first committee report with Jim from planning.
The committee met on December 4th, and we discussed 2 items. One of those items is the joint resolution of cooperation between Des Moines Waterworks and West Des Moines, and we have taken care of that as a part of today's agenda. And we also had a report on the 2013 legislation action and forecasts, and so we gained a little bit of insight into what might come forward, and I think there might be material that is being provided to the whole board after we've had that meeting. So it was a good meeting, and because partially it was short.
Always a good meeting.
Any discussion or comments? Okay, we'll go to finance and audit. Sue?
Well, we had one item tabled, the agribusiness park land sale. We had extensive discussion on that, and I just want to compliment Bill for bringing to our attention a decision that was made back in 1999, and he reviewed it with us in that we partnered with the city of Des Moines to acquire some land. At that time, we thought there was going to be a large ethanol plant developed, and obviously we would be very interested in that because of the amount of water that is used. But Bill has raised some questions regarding how that occurred, and gave, I would say, some caution to the city going forward that we would be reviewing opportunities like this in a different manner going forward. So Bill, thank you for bringing some of those issues to our attention. I think it was a wake-up call for all of us. And because of that, I'm very pleased that we did table the issue that was before us to sell a portion of the land. There are some questions, and while we did have a verbal agreement from someone from the city, we need more than that because we are dealing with taxpayer dollars in what we're doing. And the other thing that we did talk about also was the legislative committee. I spent the day at the Capitol for my real job that I'm paid to do for Des Moines University, and boy, it's heating up there. Linda, there were lots of committees and all the senators and representatives and leadership, they were back in place, and plans for a very busy session. So thank you for sharing the forecast, and I'm sure you're already up there daily in all of the meetings because they're packed nonstop.
Did you say they were back and running in place?
Pretty much running in place. They're trying to figure out what the agenda items are.
Then things are as normal.
No, it's going to be a busy session. When it will be over is the big question everyone was bringing up today.
Thank you, Sue. I guess we go to the best item of the day is the Botanical Center.
I don't know if it's the best, but let's hope so. And I'll turn these over to Bill. Bill and Randy Beavers and I and Peggy Freeze had a meeting last week on 2 items. One, we've discussed at this table a couple of times, and that is coming to an agreement with the Botanical Garden going forward on the amount of water they can use during the term of our agreement. Originally, or the way that the agreement was drafted, it was kind of open-ended that they would have free water during the time of that. And I'll turn that over to Bill. And the second item, and Bill can update you on this one too, was kind of an official, if you will, or a unofficial maybe, handing over of the keys right after the first of the year. So we're going to do some event where we publicly hand over the keys, which I think all of us in the community, and especially those of us at Waterworks, should celebrate that we're doing that. But those are the 2 items, and maybe Bill has an update on those.
And particularly the handing over the keys ceremony, I believe, is January 3rd at 9 o'clock at the dome of the Des Moines Botanical Center. Graham mentioned a meeting last week with a number of different leaders at the Botanical Gardens. That discussion really hinged on an issue that I know all of you have some concern about, and that's our obligation under a 10-year agreement to provide so-called free water. I have a great difficulty even using that phrase, but the long and short of our discussion was to try and provide some reasonable metes and bounds to what that means particularly given expansion in the botanical garden water use, consistent with their plan. I believe we were able to successfully come up with a methodology that would put limits on that in a way that's as reasonable as we can be at this point. And I'm very thankful for the help from the Botanical Gardens board members. Mr. Urban, in particular, was very helpful, and Fred White's, as well as staff from the Botanical Gardens. I'll be reporting back to you when we finalize that meets and bounds agreement, but very much appreciate your leadership, Graham, and getting that group together for that discussion. One other point that I really want to emphasize to you on Botanical Gardens issues. We have several members of the union leadership here. They've been very helpful in this process, whether we acknowledge it in our own minds or not. This really is a layoff process and involves taking folks who have worked diligently at the Botanical Center for the last several years since it moved from the city of Des Moines to Des Moines Waterworks. They've worked hard, they've done a great job through no issue of their own. Now those jobs disappear and they return back under our relationship with AFSCME to Des Moines Waterworks. It's been a great deal of work to do that as humanely as possible. I know Peggy very much involved in that from a management standpoint, as well as Amy Kaler, to keep some vacancies available for folks to move back into. And certainly the AFSCME leadership has been very good to work through details. Ron Smith, our HR director, has been instrumental in that discussion. So in a really difficult situation for Waterworks, a layoff situation essentially, that process is worked out as well as I think it foreseeably could have, and I really commend the work of a lot of people who've been involved in that. But difficult situation for folks who have made their work home at Waterworks for a number of years now to come back. A bit of a challenge for them in many, many ways, and a lot of attention paid to them. So I appreciate the work of many in this room in that effort. Not an easy one.
Okay, I guess we'll go to item C, the CEO and General Manager's comments.
My comments will be very brief. You'll notice under D through F, you have a number of additional materials, largely financial in nature, as we provide to you on a month-to-month basis. There are a couple issues that I wanted to touch on briefly. I know a number of you, all of you, have been involved, some of you slightly more than others, in the Bishop Farms property acquisition. This is a property, essentially in my terms, a farm pond gravel pit near the Maffett Reservoir that we've acquired. Gary Benjamin put in a lot of work on that, as well as Rick Mom. There were some title problems associated with that acquisition. Now that has closed, correct, Rick? We have now closed on it under your direction, the board's guidance. So that's a great denitrification asset for us as we move forward. But I know several of you on the board had a great interest in that. We will continue to work with the Iowa Department of Natural Resources on some potential community uses for that property other than the use that we have for water production, but a lot of work put in on that. My thanks to Gary and Rick in particular for their leadership behind the scenes in getting that deal closed, because there were some difficulties with that one. Several of you, David being the exception, were party to a conversation I had about a week ago about work that, with your approval, has been contracted out at the Elliott Apartments. I had promised you that I would provide a memo for you that kind of summarized what was done there and why. The long and short of it is, after approval from 4 of the 5 of you, David, I did not try to reach you out of the country. I entered into agreement, really negotiated and worked through by both Gary and Ted for contracting out the replacement of the 8-inch cast iron that's in place and failed immediately adjacent to the Elliott Apartments. That will be replaced, is in the process of being replaced now under contract. About a $54,000 project for replacement with J&K Contracting, including concrete work. The union engaged me in several discussions about using our employees as opposed to contracting that out. Again, this is an issue that I always appreciate the discussion ultimately, it was my decision that contracting this project out as opposed to using our workforce and potentially risking having to pull them off for additional seasonal work that we run into this time of the year involving main breaks or street projects to close projects that have been open to allow plowing of streets, which may be imminent, all of which are seasonal issues that press hard on us, may have caused disruption in completing this project. Hence my decision, and I take responsibility for the decision to contract that out. I appreciate the opportunity to have reached out to all of you, except David, who was unavailable, to seek permission to contract this out, despite my limitation of a $40,000 amount, taking this to $54,000 under the unique circumstances here. So thank you for that leniency. I appreciate it, but the document in front of you, and I'll certainly make a comment or make a copy available to Brian and anyone else available here in the lectern in a few minutes to document what we did and why we did it. But I appreciate the board's assistance in that rather unusual circumstance. Other than that, I have nothing to report. I know that we have an extra item after your adjournment, if you will, an informational item that has been alluded to several times here to talk about the legislative agenda and how Linda is going to help us through that process in prosecution of several items that are of great importance to us. But I know there are a number of folks here present today that may not have had comment on anything on the agenda per se, but David might have an interest in commenting on other items as they relate to waterworks operations.
I guess if anybody has any comment from the audience or the board, or we'll close the meeting then.
A motion to adjourn?
We have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
We're adjourned.
And for anyone who certainly wants to listen to an informational item, we're talking about legislation and what we're doing through the Iowa legislature in the next year to particularly advocate for some important issues involving the water, source water in particular. Linda, all yours.
Okay, thank you. I think Pat handed out just a one-pager on the legislative priorities for next year. The nutrient reduction strategy just came out a few weeks ago from the Department of Ag and Land Stewardship and the Department of Natural Resources. It's basically in response to an EPA requirement that every state establish nutrient standard. And Iowa has determined that we can't have one standard that fits for the whole state, so they have come up with a strategy instead of a standard. So we will be responding to both departments with comments, and we do anticipate that there will be some legislation come up at some point, whether it be to strengthen it or to kind of neutralize some of the provisions that are in it. We think that looking at the state through one nutrient standard probably is not too practical, but we don't. We think that there is a way to do it with multiple standards throughout the state and still be able to meet that. So we'll be working on that. The drought.
Before we get off this item, if I may, just to comment and some discussion at the earlier Finance and Audit Committee on this issue. To be clear, the nutrient reduction strategy that has been published is very controversial. It essentially looks to non-point sources and voluntarism and how water quality can be improved in Iowa. The Des Moines Waterworks position will be far more aggressive on that issue, looking beyond voluntarism, but recognizing that that will be a controversial position as we advocate on the Hill and as we advocate through whatever resources available to us, that regulation in this area is going to be absolutely critical to providing higher source water for our treatment. A voluntary system of regulation certainly has not worked in my experience, and when we look at point source regulation, that is sewer treatment facilities and cities in discharging of stormwater, there is not a voluntary process associated with that. It is a regulatory and involuntary process that has shown results. We're going to show results. In my estimation, it will involve regulation. So we'll be aggressively pursuing that, but as board members, you need to know that that will create some controversy.
And it's actually not, was made very plain at a meeting about a week ago that this is not a rulemaking. So it's not anything that they actually have to go through a public process on, but it was communicated that through the goodness of their heart, they're looking for all of the public's comments on this. There are 3 public hearings on the strategy. The second one will be tomorrow morning in Ames at 10 o'clock, and I'll be attending that one. And then there's one following that, and I don't recall the location right now, but if you're interested, I could get that to you. It is out in the state. But basically, comments will be received. There's still a question as to whether the comments will be posted on the internet, either IDLs or DNR. Kind of a whole cloak of all kinds of activities that have been going on with this nutrient strategy. So there will be a lot of discussion about it coming up. The Drought Task Force or Drought Coordination Group had disbanded for the winter months, but decided that with no precipitation to date, that they should get back together again. So they met again last Friday and talked about a little bit about where we're at in the state. And there is a priority as to who receives water based on a drought announcement out of like the governor's office, that if the whole state gets into a drought situation and he considers it emergency time, conservation practices would then be implemented. That plan, that state water plan that identifies that priority was developed in 1975 and or 78 and then revised in 1985, and it's not been revised since. There's a lot of weather issues and the industry and livestock and a whole host of things that have really changed since 1985 in the state for a relook at this water plan. So we're planning to pursue trying to get that redone and relooked at, and I've just within the last couple of days had some conversations with DNR and also with the legislator that is interested in pursuing this a little bit too. So we're going to try to develop that so that we do have a more updated and current state water plan. That's really the 3, I guess, probably priorities I can see coming up this year. A lot of things just pop up and I won't know until they actually pop up, but we'll be monitoring just for a process part of it. I really review all of the legislation that comes about to see if there's any impact on either the utility or would be in watershed, water quality in the watershed. If it does, then I will follow that legislation. And if it's something that we see moving fast and it's not going our direction or anything, then we have the Central Iowa Regional Drinking Water Commission, we have the Iowa Association of Water Agencies, and all that help to spread our power space, sort of, to speak of. And we'll send out notices to them and say this action is taking place and we need your help. Here's what we suggest. We've utilized Dave and Sue in the past as kind of a legislative committee or that will let you know if there's anything that coming about that we think the board would want to have input in. And then I also open it up. A lot of the directors are in organizations that may request legislation at some point. If they hear of something that I haven't heard of, to be sure that we keep those lines of communication going back and forth so that I know what your interest is, the director's interest is, and then I can let you know if something is happening that I think is in your area of purview that would be beneficial as well. We send out generally a list of those bills weekly and kind of give you an idea as to what the status of those bills are and who's working on them. And I believe, Bill, you said at the next last meeting that we'll be presenting at each of the board meetings monthly to let you know the status of where things are at also. So. And then the 2 federal issues that we're looking at is basically just water industry support for some of their efforts. They've primarily been focused the last few years around infrastructure and trying to develop some way of funding replacement infrastructure for utilities as they are all aging. And then still with the discussions of the Farm Bill going on, we believe that conservation practices are very important, whether they're part of a crop subsidy or whether they're part of an insurance program. Conservation should be a requirement for anybody receiving public funds, and that's kind of the stand we've taken with that. So I think that's it, unless you have questions or comments.
Linda, this board made a major investment in the Des Moines Partnership. what ongoing conversations are you having with them as it relates to either a federal or legislative agenda?
I just met with Matt a week ago, and we kind of looked at some issues that we can kind of maybe partner on. And one of those particular ones is the Watershed Improvement Review Board. That's an organization that the Department of Ag and Land Stewardship kind of provides the staffing for, but the funding goes through the Treasurer's Office. And we were involved about 6 or 7 years ago in actually having that organization developed. And it's basically a commission that was appropriated $5 million and was appropriated that for several years. It's a citizen group of which IAWA, the Iowa Association of Water Agencies, has a member on that commission, and the $5 million is then allocated through a grant application process for watershed projects. About 2 years ago, that funding was dropped to $1 million, and in 2012 there was no money funded to that group at all. We were able to get $1 million back into the budget for 2013. But in talking with Matt, I think that's the kind of thing that we can work together to try to get that funding back up to a level that we can get more projects out in the state on watershed things. And with the formation of the Watershed Management Authority for the Middle and South Raccoon, we would hope that some of those dollars will eventually go into the Raccoon River, because that's where we want our focus to be.
And when you say Matt, I don't know who Matt is.
Matt Hinch is the new Government Affairs Director for the partnership. I'm sorry.
Got it.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, Jay's replacement.
But if I may, a couple issues here, just to make sure, Linda, that I have a full appreciation. We are a member of the Greater Des Moines Partnership, a significant contributor. Coordination with them, important, obviously, to make sure that we're not at cross purposes, and to learn if there are opportunities where we can be helpful in legislation that sounds like we initiated comes full circle back to us. But the process for you as board members to be involved in issues that are important to you, and you have some sense of nutrient strategy is an important issue. From the staff's perspective, I know often, whether it's a landlord-tenant leaning issue or any of a number of other issues that may come into play that may be of some interest to you, if we can keep eyes on your behalf as board members, we're happy to do that. There'll be a number of issues I think we can foresee: commercial property tax reform, gun control. There'll be a number of things that are going to be going on that clearly we as an entity have no real stake in an outcome, and we will remain neutral. We'll rely on communication with you on those items that we think are important, but the monthly reporting back to you during the legislative session of critical benchmarks and critical discussions, I think, is going to be very important. This is an area, frankly, that I don't have a lot of experience, so I would be more than happy to get guidance from each and every one of you on how we can best leverage our resources, because we do have a significant stake in staff resources here, as well as our contribution to the Des Moines Partnership that would provide and should provide benefit to this organization. So if you have ideas on other avenues you want us to pursue, we certainly need and want to hear that. I'm confident that focusing on source water issues will be our short-term consideration, but if there are recalibration to that we should be involved in, we're going to want to hear about that and are more than happy to recalibrate based on that. But I'm confident that this area in particular, any issues involving water quantity and water quality legislation and regulatory review, will be very controversial in the next year or so. As you feel controversy and are approached, we're happy to meet your needs and the needs of the board in terms of adapting positions that make sense to you as board members and under your direction. So please feel free to contact either me or Linda directly.
And I might mention too, on the weekly reports that I send out, there's 3 ways that we can register for a bill, and we're either supporting, opposing, or monitoring. And for the most part, we will be monitoring most of the bills, and by registering to monitor them, that just gives us the opportunity to go to the committee meetings, talk with legislators. So if we're not registered on the bill, we're not supposed to be lobbying them on that bill. So many times it will be a monitoring. Also, the bills can change extremely rapidly, especially the first part of the session, and so you never know for sure what you would be supporting if you said support. So at the beginning especially, there'll be a lot that we'll be monitoring just to see how they kind of come through a couple of the final dates. So. Okay. Thank you.
If I may, one additional item that I'm surprised Pat did not remind me that I needed to do, because she always takes care of me. I am going to give to each of you, and I'll have copies out here, drafts of the draft agendas for each of the committees, that is the Finance and Audit Committee for next month, as well as the Planning Committee. If you have additions or concerns based on those items, please feel free to get a hold of me.